Backseas Musical Podcast.
About a year ago, I interviewed Cheryl Pawelski, one of the co-owners and co-founders of Omnivore Recordings. Omnivore is a fascinating record company that finds, restores, and repackages records, many of which have been long forgotten, lost, or unreleased to the public. What's fascinating about Omnivore is that it's not just a company that's selling records. It's actually a record company that's restoring history. Each release comes with its own story, its own background, and then repackaged in a way that gives you a new appreciation as to why some of these artists are significant and why digging into these rabbit holes is worth pursuing. More than that, they also give you a very specific insight into where these artists were in their careers and in their lives and what made this music possible. They also release new music too, but for the most part, Omnivore Recordings is known for archiving musical history and then giving it a second lease on life. And in some cases, Omnivore is giving some music its very first chance of life. Since its inception, Omnivore has released music from the Beach Boys, Tim Buckley, Alex Chilton, Woody Guthrie, Richard Hell, Big Star, The Knack, George Jones, Little Richard, The Motels, NRBQ, Art Pepper, Jaco Pastorius, and many, many more. This year, Cheryl Pawelski won her second Grammy Award for Best Historical Recording for It's Such a Good Feeling, The Best of Mr. Rogers. It's a well-deserved award. Cheryl is someone I've known since we were in college together at Marquette University back in the 80s, and she's had such an incredible career, and her outlook on music preservation, discovery, and restoration is a pretty inspiring story. And so it's always a pleasure to welcome her back. This is my conversation with my friend Cheryl Pawelski from Omnivore Recordings on Backseas Musical Podcast. Good to have you back. Congratulations on the Grammy. Unbelievable.
Thank you.
I mean,
that was a surprise.
That's better than a Marquette Alumni Award.
Nah. Yeah, I don't. That would be fun. I don't know. No, it was such a weird year. You know, we did it in our living room. And on top of that, it was such a surprise. You know, I never expected. Never expected it. So it was a lovely surprise at a very dark time.
Well, you never expected it, but on the other hand, there had and the Grammy was won for this Mr. Rogers retrospective. It's but there's been so much of them going on with the Mr. Rogers brand. I mean, there had been a documentary, a movie, and then you guys come up with this best of album, which restored a lot of his stuff, and I think the timing was right, where people are and things had been so bad for so long that I think the idea of going back to a kinder, gentler point of view probably resonated with the people who were voting for the Grammy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, there's a lot of love for Mr. Rogers, and with good reason, right? So. He's definitely a person who is and was on the right side of history. So I agree with that. I think that he is beloved for that reason, and it was sort of directly tied. Morgan Neville, who directed the documentary, is a friend of mine, and the genesis of the project happened when we went to the screening of his Mr. Rogers documentary, and I said. How come you didn't call me for a soundtrack? And he said he was busy making a movie, but, we just had a conversation about the music that happened on the Mr. Rogers show and how it exposed, several generations of kids to jazz because they played live on the set. And we just agreed that, there just wasn't enough Mr. Rogers music out there. So I got in touch with the Mr. Rogers company, and we decided to put out a brand new best of.
Now, it was all that music all, I mean, how, in what shape was it in when you found it? Was it well protected over the years, or was there a lot of cleanup involved in it?
There a little bit, but it was really well archived by the company, and it was kind of funny because when I called, in true Cheryl fashion, my first question was, do you have anything that's unissued? Like, Mr. Rogers songs. But as it turns out, it was the right question to ask, because we have several tracks on the project that were indeed unissued, and one of them was the song "Tomorrow" that he used to end the show with, and it had never been on a Mr. Rogers record, but there was a recording of it.
Really?
So that ends the new best of.
So
Funny, but
But there was never like Mr. Rogers sings John Valby or a Gigi Allen retrospective by nothing like that.
No.
Oh, that's too bad.
No, you silly man.
Well, I mean, it's funny to me. I mean, we're on the air, we're reading the winners of the Grammys, and I'm looking down the list, and I see your name, and I'm like, oh my God, I know that lady. And I can't tell you how many times I have dropped the Cheryl Pawelski name when it comes to your record company. When Omnivore releases something and it's somebody that that people know, a real popular artist, and Lord knows you got loads of them. It's always like, I know her, and if I have her phone number somewhere. It's like, I'm always, and I'm saying this mostly because, one, I'm shallow, and then two, I live vicariously through the success stories of others, and I just when I see those success stories with your name attached, I'm very, very proud of what you've accomplished here, because it is a remarkable story with Omnivore and your
That's
entire
really
career.
sweet.
Well, I don't mean to be. I don't mean for it to be sweet and to butter you up. But the fact of the matter is, we have known each other for an awful long period of time, and I don't always feel the same source of pride with everybody who has something great in their career. There's certainly a couple of people I'm like, how'd that happen? But with you, but with you, it's like there were a lot of people we went to school with that wanted to be involved in the record company, and the closest that many of them were ever going to come was to get 12 albums for a penny with the Columbia House Record and Tape Club. That was the closest they were ever truly going to get. But you were
That's hilarious.
But it's true. I think you were different, and I think you were also more focused really on the music rather than about the culture of the music, and I think that makes the difference for you. I mean, you are clearly a lover of music.
I think I also have screw loose. I think I have a high tolerance for failure, and and that is a secret to success, right? You learn from failing, and I don't know. I just I think the word focus was right. I mean, back when we first knew each other, I had just sort of snapped into a lane. I felt for the first time like I could really, I really felt like I was being able to use the problem-solving muscle that felt good and the creative muscles that felt good. And for those who don't know, we met in college, and it was the first time I was quote unquote producing something, because we worked at the college TV station.
Right.
And as soon as I was pulling parts together to make something new, and it's really that basic, It's like, well, you have the writing, and then you have the person, the on-air talent, you have the camera people, and it all comes together like this, and you're taking all of these disparate parts and putting them together to make something brand new. Boy, did that click. And it's the same thing you do when you produce a record, and it's the same thing when you put together a radio show. There's something that was really profoundly satisfying to me, and it was the first time I got to exercise that. So I got very focused and very weird very fast.
Yeah, well, thank goodness you didn't have a running start to get to the weirdness. But I think one of the things that's true, and it's been true for me, and I think it's been true for everybody that's been able to go and do what they set out to do. One, there is a focus, but there's also trusting your instincts on things, but also being willing and allowing opportunity to happen. And I've always been a believer that if you seize upon an opportunity, more opportunities follow. And if you're doing it in a positive, direction, and being good to people along the way, good things will happen.
Yeah, the way I describe that is you make your own luck, right?
Right. Well, that's it.
Yeah, you make your own luck because I've always attributed to if you work harder than everybody else, you see more of the opportunities, and then you become an overnight sensation, to quote the Raspberries. It's one of those things, though. You also have to. I brought up failure before, and that's really important, and because you can't be dissuaded by that. If you try something and you're banging your head against the wall and it's not working, then you try something else.
And you were right saying this earlier. I mean, those are those moments where you learn the most. That didn't work,
right.
But what will make it work better next time? It's not repeating the same thing over and over again. It's just finding a better, more efficient, smarter way of doing the things that you want to get accomplished. And I think that's, I don't want to say that's something that we learned in college. I think part of that is just, who we are as people more than maybe anything else.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of tenacity that, has to come from you. College and stuff like that just gave us the opportunity to exercise what felt good. And, when I talk to folks coming up behind us now, I just say, what do you want to do every day that you wake up? And if you can be passionate about something the way we're passionate about what you do, then failure is not an obstacle, and everything else becomes less of an obstruction, and in your life it's but you have to put a lot of parts together to get to that place. But I do feel like when I met you was pretty golden, because I felt like I was lighting up, and we had a group around us that was pretty talented. Everybody kind of went on to do some pretty cool things,
pretty amazing things.
So I'm proud of us as a whole lot.
It's
as ramshackle as we are.
It's fun. This is kind of an aside story, but last summer there was a Zoom meeting of a bunch of Marquette, former students getting together, mostly broadcasting, students, and it was probably like 10 people involved in it. And, some of them, the people I knew very, very well, and some people I didn't know all that well. But then, we went around the horn and said, well, what do you remember about everybody here? And I don't know why. This is everyone seemed to have a story that began with, "What I was out drinking with Bax one night." And it was just like every single one. And there was one member of the faculty, John Prey. I'm sure you might remember John Prey. And even his recollection was, "I was out drinking with Bax one night." I'm going, how is this possible? And thankfully, again, you learn from your mistakes, and you suddenly start to focus yourself a little bit. So that was an uncomfortable little moment for just a few months ago.
But all that says to me is that we're overdue.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a lot I want to get to here. Obviously, when you talk about specific projects and stuff, and I had to listen to the last interview we did last year because they didn't want to ask the same questions about jellyfish all over again. But there are some projects that
I was really sick, wasn't I?
No, you did fine. I was wondering if all my jellyfish questions were what were making you ill.
Oh, no, I think it was bronchitis.
Well, that was it. But the thing that fascinates me about Omnivore Recordings is it's not just that you're releasing music, because there's a lot of companies that just do that. And some record companies release just a certain kind of music and don't really get very diverse. But I think what separates you guys from everything else, and I find this absolutely fascinating, is all of these things that you've released are historical documents. They're filling in gaps of history. It's not just that this album was lost, or this album was out of print for so many years, or this album was very popular but needs like an overhaul and packaging. You're kind of connecting dots along the way of this timeline of music that kind of pulls it all together. And to me, that's an art all by itself just doing that part of it, never mind the actual release of the music.
Yeah, it's I'll tell you, it's when I was at the major labels, my job was largely to, for lack of a better term, exploit, and that's the term that it gets used. The catalogs that belong to the label I was at. So, when I was at Rhino was the catalog group for the Warner Music Group, which looked after the catalogs of Warner Brothers, Reprise, Atlantic, Elektra Asylum. So whatever mountain of records we were sitting on there, it was our job to tell those stories, right? And oftentimes, sure, Pet Sounds reissued for the umpteenth time. When we started Omnivore, we felt like it was really important to continue to tell stories. And so if a record, first of all, the music has to be great. Second of all, we all have to be a fan. But third, it should have a great story. And we always felt that to fill in a page or of the story of an artist or add an important piece to their discography, that was not only fun, but also turns out it can be an important endeavor. So that's sort of been some of the stuff that we've gone after. And there's plenty of labels that kind of work the line in the seam of reissues, and there's nothing wrong with that. We do some of that. This album has never been on CD before, or it's never been in the digital world for streaming. And that's a different sort of service. And like I say, we do some of that, but I've always been much more interested in things that didn't previously exist in nature.
Well, and that kind of leads up to one of the first projects I wanted to talk about was, and you're about to release a couple of things with Laura Nero. One called "Go Find the Moon," the audition tapes, which to me sounds fascinating. Here's a woman that was maybe one of the best songwriters of her generation. Tell us about these audition tapes and how did you go about even finding this?
Well, couple things. So Laura Nero is, as you said, just one of the most wonderful songwriters of the 20th century, and I've always been, of course I'm a fan. It just so happens, though, that a very dear friend of mine, Michelle Court, wrote her biography. And I started working on the Live in Japan record first. It had only been issued in its entirety in Japan. And except for there was a small cut-down version, just a 10-tracker on a sort of a budget release for EMI Capital Special Markets, where I was employed. And so I knew about this concert recording. And I just felt that it needed sort of a wider audience. People all over the world can enjoy it now. A lot of releases throughout the years have only come out in Japan for that territory.
Right.
This is sort of like, let's get this out here. It's really wonderful. It's just Laura on piano with the three Diane backup singers, and it's glorious. But so I had to go to the estate to license that, and I was working with an attorney person who was very also a huge Laura fan and motivated to get this stuff done. And we just started bandying about other ideas for releases from Laura that we'd like to see, because there's still a lot of material sitting around. So we thought, well, let's start at the start, right, with the audition. We knew it existed. I knew I had the right restoration engineer in my partner, Mike Graves. And, it had floated a little bit in some collector circles, but I knew that we could make it better. And it just so happens that my dear friend, Michelle Court, who sadly is no longer with us, that she had the cleanest copy of the recording, and her partner was able to get us a copy of that, and Mike worked his magic in the restoration. So it's short. It's no longer than 20 minutes. but it really demonstrates how, as a teenager, she arrived as this glorious artist, fully formed. And
Really?
the first song she plays is "And When I Die." It's crazy.
And
Just
even
magnificent.
and even at that young age, in an audition reel, you can hear the magic of a Laura Nero right away.
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
From the first note. And so it's such a pleasure to, get some of these things officially released for fans. Obviously Laura is also no longer with us, but there is still music by her to be heard, and I want to hear it, and I'm sure all of her other fans do.
One of the things that we talked about last time, and we talked about it, in great length, was about Big Star. I'm a big fan. I know you're a big fan of Big Star.
Yeah.
But you also just released something that I had never heard before, and every live recording of Alex Chilton I've ever heard doesn't sound like this. You released something called Alex Chilton, the High Rhythm Section, Boogie Shoes Live on Beale Street. And unlike a lot of what he recorded later in his career, you can hear how much fun Alex Chilton is having. And this is a guy that's not known to have had a whole lot of fun in the second half of his career. But it is an astoundingly great live set from Alex Chilton.
Yeah, it's really fun. And I think Alex had more fun than we think. He was a great musician. He was a great singer. He spent some time deconstructing some of that, also to great effect. But this one came about because David Less, who is a record producer in Memphis, had put together something he called Fred Stock, which was a benefit for the Memphis musician Fred Ford, who was in failing health at the time and needed some help. So he put on a show at the I think it was the New Daisy Theater, and asked Alex to come and play. And, there were some other really cool people on the bill, like Rufus and Carla Thomas and some others. But, he felt he needed to ask Alex to come and contribute too. And he had gotten the High Rhythm guys to come and, sort of be the backing band for the night. And so, Alex, I think that was too good an opportunity for Alex to pass up. So, for him to show up without rehearsal with these guys, not that they needed it, and just, throw together covers on the spot. I think the in the moment sort of high wire aspect of it really played to his enjoyment of the night. And, I really great musicians can pull that stuff off. And sometimes you get performances that really light up because everybody's sort of really hyper paying attention to each other and really grooving. And it's not like the guys in the High Rhythm Section needed any additional groove.
No, not at all.
They're the best. It's a pretty great set, and it was fun. It was a fun surprise.
There's one part in the performance where they don't know what they're going to play next, and I don't know if it was Alex who said, "We're going to play Kansas City. You guys know Kansas City?" And they play Kansas City after starting off with a cover of Casey and the Sunshine Band's Boogie Shoes, which is surprisingly great, but not that great, but not surprising because it's Alex Chilton, and right. Alex was just an awesome musician, and the High Rhythm Section is terrific in this.
Yeah, absolutely. All those Ann Peebles and Al Green cuts, and just the feel at Royal Studios and the vibe those guys got. Yeah, I've had the good fortune to roam around a lot of those Memphis studios, and I'll tell you, the second you walk into High, you understand immediately why every Al Green song recorded there sounds the way it does. it's oozing with that vibe, and you add those particular musicians into that stew, and wow, it's great.
It's awesome. One of the other things that
Yeah.
that you released this year, and the moment I saw that it was released, I actually reached out to him to see if I can get him on the podcast, and was roundly rejected. Unfortunately, was Richard Hell and the Voidoids,
No.
the release of Destiny Street. And I made a good pitch
Yeah.
and everything. He says, "Well, it sounds like you're doing pretty well over there, but I'm going to say no." And I'm like, "Oh, okay,
Right.
I'll try again." And I got a second no, but this is his second album with
Yeah.
the Voidoids, with Richard Quine, who's absolutely great. But this is an album that probably didn't get the credit it probably deserves. But more importantly, Richard is a guy who hasn't made any music of really any kind since 1984, 85. When you have a guy like that who is clearly done with his music career and has probably talked it through a million times, was it hard to get that project off the ground with a guy who may or may not have as much interest in his musical career as the other things he's done?
No, because he's a guy who has a really committed interest to getting things right, which is why he went back to this to get it right. He had tried a couple times over the years, and we include every iteration of the record, so you can see how it did change. He was never happy with the original, and so he went back to it. He had found some cassettes of the backing tracks and had tried again to sort of fix what he didn't like about it. But then he found 3 of the 4 multi-track reels. And so he was able to go back with the producer from the IAAS? Anyway, he worked with one of the guys from the IAAS to mix to his satisfaction from those multis almost the entire record. And the cool news is they also found an additional bonus track. So, that all that stuff, Nick Zinner from the IAAS. Yes. There you go. I knew I would get it. But he wanted to get it right. And I really appreciate that. Everybody at Omnivore always feels that same way. It's like, if you don't get it right, it's not worth doing. So you should work your hardest to get it right.
Yeah.
And so, as we were talking through it, there was the demos record as well, and that's going to come out separately as a Record Store Day piece this summer. So it was nice to work with. It was really nice to work with him. He's obviously a legend, and to kind of help facilitate him being able to put this to bed properly.
Well, he's got a long history of albums that were, for whatever reason, were probably not done right the first time, or he didn't last long enough in that particular band to have recorded like with Television or with the Heartbreakers, and who both released such amazing records themselves, and Richard's contribution is all over it, but he himself is not in it, and it's a crazy career. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, he's a multi-talented dude too, right? Because he's a writer, and I know he's working on some new writing, and he's talked about that. So, I think I think his contributions are in different disciplines, and so I was really pleased to be able to help facilitate this one.
I know one of the you guys have released a lot of jazz records over the years too, and I know you grew up in with jazz in your house, and you've always been a very big jazz fan. This one project I think is really compelling. The Hassam Ibn Ali Metaphysics record, the Lost Atlantic album. This I heard a little bit of it the other day, and it's very, very good. But it's like it's fascinating that a guy who's got these many connections again. Here's a bunch of music that's never been heard before. Tell us about that record from 1965.
This particular recording was thought lost. The rumors persisted that there was a copy somewhere, which ultimately it turned out to be true. What had happened was there was a fire in the Atlantic vaults in 1978, and pretty certain that the original tapes were destroyed in that fire. So what we think happened was somebody had made an acetate from those reels, incomplete, because I think it's missing one song from the original sessions that is known to have been recorded. But we restored the record from the acetates, which also strangely had three shorter versions or edits of three of the tunes at the end, but we decided to keep them because they were there on the acetate. So it was we finally found a tape recording of the acetate that was made from the original session tapes, if that makes sense. That was sitting in the Atlantic vaults. We have friends there, and Patrick Milligan, who worked to find that tape, has since gone back to work at Rhino. We traded seats. He was at Rhino before me, then I went to Rhino, and then now he's back. So we've been roaming around those vaults for a while, but once it was finally found, it just became inevitable. It was the story is amazing. He was buddies with John Coltrane, and just intrinsic to the Philadelphia jazz scene for a really long time, and was very influential. And everybody thought that the only recording that existed of him was the Max Roach record that he was on for Atlantic the year before these recordings happened. So again, this is we just doubled the output of Hassan Ibn Ali, right?
When you find out about something that exists, how hard is it to first of all verify that what you're finding is exactly what you think it's supposed to be, and who is involved in it? I mean, at what point does the research become exhausted when you're dealing with something that's been locked in a vault since 1965? Well,
that's a hard question to answer because, as far as authenticity and stuff like that, that's easy. It is or it isn't, and there's that's just the long and short of it. It's a different process every time, which is why it's hard to answer because sometimes these things can be found and show up like this, and sometimes you wish something existed and you keep looking for it and you never find it, and so who knows what happened? All of this stuff is so ephemeral, and these days we live online and in databases, and all it takes is one misspelling to lose something forever somewhere. So there are things I'm looking for that probably exist, but they could be misspelled in a database, and we'll never find them because of that.
Well, that's kind of why I'm asking, because even the best database on the internet, you're kind of at the mercy of how well somebody in 1965 or earlier took notes as these things were happening. It's like you may be able to get these recordings, but there's no way to tell for sure, who's playing with that artist or who may have done the producing or anything like that. I mean, there's just so much missing information that it's like, well, can that stuff be found and or can it not be found?
There is a lot of missing information, but that's never held me back.
No, clearly not.
It just is what it is. And I'll tell you what, I trust the information coming from 1965 a whole lot more than I trust the information now. It's living online has its benefits, but I'm of the team that says not so great.
Yeah.
and it's because it's only as good as the people putting it in there, or only as good as true as it is, or only as good at the assumption is that everything is there, and that couldn't be further from the truth. And that's people think about Spotify and first of all, you're renting music on it, you don't own it, and second, you're at the mercy of the entity. So if a label or an artist or Spotify wants to remove something from there, it's gone.
Yeah.
So, and that's sort of like the internet to me, right? You're kind of not in charge. You're there just sort of sifting through and trying to make up your mind about stuff. And so, when I look at a discography from 1965, I'm pretty damn sure it's 100%, right?
Well, it's interesting that you talk about that. I mean, I know over the years, online, you and I have discussed a particular artist, which I really like, but his catalog is very, very hard to find. And I'm talking about Thomas Walsh from Pugwash. This is a guy from Ireland who is a wonderful songwriter and has written and produced music with Ray Davies of the Kinks, Andy Partridge from XTC, and Jason Faulkner from Jellyfish, Jeff Lynne from ELO. They all laud over this guy, but his first 5 albums are out of print, and it's his own. It's kind of his own decision to have allowed that to happen. You guys have Omnivore's got 2 records by him, and then he produced another one with Jason Faulkner, several years later. But those first 5 albums have been like trying to find a needle in a haystack. They're so hard to find, and I don't know if it's an intentional decision on his part or if he's just waiting for your phone call, Cheryl, to get it back. I really don't know.
I'm not sure. We haven't been in touch too recently, but I think that some artists want to be more in charge of their stuff, and that's fine. But it's also a matter of resources, how much they can have out at any given time. I mean, it's the same with us, it's like, how much can we release at any given time, given our resources? So I'm not sure. I think, but it is a common problem, and it's exactly what I'm talking about. And, it's whatever Thomas is doing, that's certainly his prerogative to do it. It's his art. But I think I respect that. It's insidious to me, though, when it's done for business purposes by an intermediary that is just a distribution mechanism.
Right.
And the assumption is that everything is there, and that's the only place I can discover music, and that's just not true. And I'm not taking pot shots only at Spotify. I think all of the digital service providers are they provide a service, but it would do all music aficionados and enthusiasts well to think about what that means. If you really love a particular piece of music, it's probably good to invest in it.
I spoke to Jason Faulkner a couple months ago, and one of his albums was only a Japanese release. And if you bought it on Amazon, it would cost you $900. And he was like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "How much of that are you getting?" He said, I'm pretty sure I'm getting next to nothing. When I hear stuff like that, but then I also see the stories of, Paul Simon and, Bob Dylan selling the publishing rights to their catalogs and the value of that. And a lot of people questioning, well, why would you do that? If I'm a 75, 80-year-old artist and I've got a catalog that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm kind of looking at the future and saying because of the digital platforms and because it takes millions of hits for me to see dime one, it makes perfect sense why they would sell the publishing rights to their music. At least to me, it makes sense. If there's from a purely financial estate planning type of point of view. I mean, what's your take on those decisions?
Well, you can't take it with you.
True.
And they're selling their future royalty flow. So is it bird in the hand? I think that some folks have a reaction to it the way that we originally had a reaction to artists allowing their songs to be used in commercials, right? And
right.
Everybody thought, "Oh, that's terrible," that's so impure and sellout and all that other stuff. And there is something that feels a little oogie about it. But the flip side is, man, a guy like Bob Dylan, we all watched. He turned 80 this week, and if this takes care of his family and the people that work for him and their kids and grandkids and everything that's important to him, again, you can't take it with you, and it just becomes somebody else's royalty flow.
Right.
And I'm not sure, at the end of the day, if you buy a Bob Dylan record, does it matter to you that you own the music versus who's getting paid for it? I don't know.
I think,
right?
I think from the artist's point of view, at a certain time in your life, it makes sense. If you've got a guy who's 25 and saying, I'm going to sell the publishing rights to my music, I'd say, you're crazy. You got a whole potential career in front of you. But if you're kind of at the end of your career and your chance of earning, what you had earned before no longer exists or exists in a different, way, it's like, okay, maybe I understand that decision. Maybe that makes sense to me.
Yeah. I think we just respond to it, as if it's some sort of violation, and not entirely sure why, but I think the folks that feel that way because we came up at a time where this stuff was had a little bit more sacred cowness to it, right?
I did look something up about how many people have 2 Grammys in their living room, and you have now 2 of them, right? It's 2.
I do. Yeah.
2 Grammys. Here's
yes.
You have twice as many Grammys as Tom Petty, Leo Sayer, Meatloaf, and Motorhead. I just want just think about that for a moment. You have twice as much hardware as those guys. I mean, Leo Sayer, okay, maybe those 2 Grammys could have gone to somebody else, but everybody else, everybody else on that list only has 1. So that's mighty impressive.
I'm going to have to get a really big chain and wear them around my neck.
One last thing, I noticed that when you won, you're sitting in your living room and Audrey is with you, and behind you is your record collection. Now,
right.
And I got a pretty big collection. It is nowhere near what yours is. And every time I see someone who's got a bigger collection than I do, I always ask the same question. Like, when was the last time you had to move all of that?
We just moved it 2 years ago, and it was unpleasant. I felt like because it's what I do, and it is large, and I just tend it at this point. It grows on its own, and that's no lie because I'm always making this stuff. Yep. And I'm always acquiring more for research, and it really is this. It's a living library now, and so I couldn't try to do this dual city thing that we're doing without having the collection be where I'm mostly going to be, and so we did have to move it, and I'm still dealing with the ramifications of that, but. Since last year, I was forced to sit down with the rest of the world. I had some time to finally get some of it reordered from the move.
I would rather move a whole truckload of sectional couches than have to remove. Put my stuff in boxes.
It's heavy.
Put it,
and remember, my better half. It's all books. So for all intents and purposes, all we own are books and records. That's some heaviness right there.
I had my stuff in boxes for almost a full year until I finally said, okay, now I'm going to put it in alphabetical order. And I got like halfway through. I said, to hell with it. I completely lost interest.
I got to lay my hands on this stuff all the time. So I better be able to find it. So I had to get that ordered and straight right away.
Well, Cheryl, congratulations on the Grammy. It's always a real pleasure to talk to you, and best of luck.
Thanks so much.
I know you guys got a lot of exciting stuff coming up, and everyone's got every project has got an amazing story behind it.
Well, we do, and I promise you, I've got some real some real special things on the way. They might not quite all get out until 2022, but you'll know them when you see them.
All right. Well, I'll call you when that happens.
That sounds great.
Awesome, Cheryl. Thank you very, very much.
All right. You take care.
You too. You can find out what sort of stuff is coming up with Omnivore Recordings by checking out their website, which is absolutely incredible, omnivorerecordings.com. And you can always email me, too, at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to hear what you think. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Baxy's Musical Podcast.